Hey, welcome to the Art of Advisory. I forget what day it is because I'm at Scaling New Heights along with my co-host Hector Garcia. Hector, what's up, my friend?
Just really excited, going live on Facebook in the middle of the conference floor. As you can tell, there's a lot of commotion, a lot of things going on. Kirk and I both taught classes in the last couple of days, and we also got a couple of classes happening. And Kirk, we actually didn't prepare for this. We were just setting this up. We said we're going to try to go live, just set this up, and Kirk just got here, and let's just come up with a topic. So, so it seems like the common theme is there's a lot of changes happening coming in the pipeline with artificial intelligence and computers that are taking over a lot of the mundane processes that we're doing. And the folks that attend these conferences come here looking for ideas on how to possibly make changes in their practice to become better advisors. But I wanted to hit on a key word that I've hit a lot of speakers have talked. They talked about the word transformation. So let's deep dive into the word transformation and tell me maybe from your process as a practitioner, what needs to happen in order for you to be able to accept changes and go through a stage of transformation.
So you're talking about going through transformation in your own practice. Okay. So I did a session on this morning. I think it boils down to risk. We have to be willing to take risks. We get comfortable with the status quo. We get comfortable with doing what we've always done the way we've always done it. And when somebody says, let's try something new, our first reaction is to pull back or to push against it, because change is hard. We don't like change. But change is something that we're either going to go with change or change is going to force itself on us. And so that's my first thing, is we have to be willing to move toward the risk. What about you?
I actually agree with that. I think I was listening to Ron Baker speak in his last podcast, and he brought up a new concept I never heard of before called limbic thinking, something like that. And he was talking about what happens in your head when you go from taking one position to then taking the opposite position. Something that really only happens maybe 2 or 3 times in a lifetime, right? Where we knew what was true, and then all of a sudden the complete opposite we believe in. And that middle, and I'm maybe mispronouncing it, that middle is this really strange place where your brain is not really thinking logically. It's just thinking in a lot of abstracts, a lot of risk, a lot of the things that we're sort of built in to avoid. So, what are some of the things that people need to be thinking about in order to help themselves go through a transformation, whatever transformation may be? A new idea comes along, right? A new concept that shatters the status quo, something that's challenging their thinking and saying, you need to be doing this, which is different than what you're doing now. What are some of the things that people need to be thinking about when making those transformations?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is you actually have to be open-minded. I mean, you actually need to be willing to entertain new ideas. At a conference like this, there's a lot of ideas that can be thrown at you, and we have to be willing to consider them. If we just dismiss every new idea, then we're kind of setting ourselves 2 steps behind already. So that's my first thought, is we need to be open-minded. I think the second step is we then need to explore the idea. We need to study the idea. We're not going to change our position on something that we have accepted as true for a long time unless, number one, an event happens that forces us to change, or 2, we have a conversation with somebody that really changes the way we're thinking. But even when we have a conversation with somebody, we're still going to have to give it more time to process. I think part of what you were talking about in the brain is just kind of, the brain has to literally rewire neurons in a different way. When we believe something, our brain literally has a hardwired path of neurons about that particular issue, about that particular position. And when we start to change, the brain has to literally write a new path, a new set of neurons for that new way of thinking. And that doesn't take place quickly. That's one of the reasons why I think we have to study a new position. But then once we study it, at some point you have to pull the trigger. So let me give a couple of examples here. I had one student approach me who I was doing a value pricing class, And she came up to me and said, I went to your class last year, and I implemented what I learned, and I increased my revenue by 30% in a year's time, which is a great result. And then I've had some people that have attended my classes on value pricing over and over, year after year, possibly multiple times in the same year, and I see them 2 or 3 years later. Hey, how's it going? Oh, I haven't tried it yet. So that's an example of, it's one thing to go to a conference and learn and to challenge these paths, to be open-minded, but then you have to be willing to venture out and try it. Now, you don't necessarily have to pick something as radical as changing your whole business model as the first thing. I guess it depends on what is the level of change. What's something in your business that it felt more radical going into it, and it then kind of, once you got into it, you're like, no, not so much?
So I want to piggyback on something you said and then answer your question. I think the other important element of change and transformation is that you have to be accepting that you are going to lose something in the process, right? So you may lose some money, you may lose some clients, you may lose even some of the values that you held true, because this new idea may challenge some of what were your core values. Not saying in an ethical fashion. I'm just talking about on a previous position you already had, that you pretty much stood your ground for so long. So you have to absolutely be aware or be okay with losing something. You could also lose money in the process, right? You can price some deals wrong. You can take some of the wrong clients. You can do the wrong task or the wrong or give the wrong product to the client, and you may get some refunds and returns. It comes with the territory that through the transformation is going to be messy, and there will be some losses. But it's that concept of taking one step back to then take 2 steps forward. So you were asking about something that I've done in my practice that has been in that level of transformation. One has been taking time out of my billable time, per se, to spend time on myself, to develop myself, develop my skills, and also spend time sharing what I've learned and the things that I've kind of encountered as I grow my practice, new things, new concepts, new technologies. So taking that time to teach myself, and then taking that time to share it as part of the learning process, because sharing is a really important piece of the learning process. For example, we're in an accounting conference where people come in and they get their CPEs. I don't know if you knew this, Kirk, but if you are an accountant, a CPA, and you train a class that gives CPEs, you get 2 CPEs instead of 1. So you, as a trainer, you get double. And that's because once you teach it, you're learning it twice, right? And it is, and because you have to teach it, because you have to teach it, you have to be on point, right? Because you have a spotlight in front of you. You have people judging you every word, everything you're saying. So you're going to be forced to learn it better, go in depth, prepare. So when then you get put on the spot to teach it, that's just an in-depth learning process. So when I brought that into my practice, that took away a significant amount of time from my billable time. I don't spend 40 hours a week doing work that you bill or client work. I spend maybe 30 hours a week, sometimes 25 hours a week. And the other time I'm doing this radical idea of learning and sharing it. That just seemed very radical from any accountant or any finance person that will put numbers in a spreadsheet to say, well, if you maximize your hours and you build this many clients, this is how much you can get. And if you take away 10 hours to dedicate to yourself or to share to your colleagues, you're taking away your billable time. But what you don't really get is that in the long term, now that I'm only working 25 hours a week or 30 hours a week doing billable work, I actually tend to charge an average of 3 to 4 times what I used to charge before, because I position myself as an expert, micro expert, niche expert on particular areas, and people want to work with those people, and they're willing to pay double, triple, quadruple because they're working with the person that's willing to sacrifice billable time to perfect the craft. So I think that's been probably as radical as per se that it has been in terms of my practice. What else have you learned interesting in this conference?
Well, as you know, I'm not a bookkeeper or CPA by background. I really come from the software side of things. And it's really been interesting to hear a conference about technology that is not a technology conference. Of course, if you look around the exhibit hall here, almost every booth is about some type of software. There's not much else here. I'm sure if you were at this conference maybe 10 years ago, it was very much different. Some was software, but there were other things. But almost everything here is software now. And so it's been interesting just to hear what I would call non-software people talking about technology. You know, the theme here is taming the machines, the idea that artificial intelligence is coming, and as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, is going to take over some of the things that people are doing now. And so we might tend to have a couple of reactions. One would be fear because, oh shoot, I'm not going to have a job. Or the other is, well, how's that going to create a new opportunity for the business or for yourself as a professional? One of the things you've heard many times here already from stage, both the main stage and the small groups, is the idea that technology is actually an opportunity for us to get above, quote, the mundane, I can't talk either. Mundane, repetitive things that we may normally do, and actually do the things that only humans can do. That there are some things that we do now that really we shouldn't be doing because it's something that can be automated. And if it can be automated, go ahead and let the machine do it and do what we can't do. Do things like tackle risks. Do things like use creativity. Do things like express compassion. These are things the machines don't have any idea about. And so it's just been interesting to hear about technology and about the view of technology at a conference that, while it may always have a technology element, it's not strictly about technology. If you'd ask me what are they going to talk about, I'd say, well, isn't this a bunch of number geeks getting together? Right. Not a bunch of tech geeks. So I also wanted to pick up on what you said because I thought it was a really accurate point. If you want to learn something, teach it. And that's exactly the way I actually learned to value price. It was one of the ways. I told people I was going to do it, and then I signed up to teach a course on it 90 days later, which is kind of funny. But it actually helped. And so, like for you and me, we're teaching sessions here. A couple of the sessions that I'm teaching are on topics I haven't taught on before, and it has pushed my limits. It's pushed me to dig into something and develop some expertise that I can share on it where previously I didn't have that. So is there anything in particular that maybe you have decided to teach in the past year or two so that you could learn it? What's something that maybe fit that mold?
So that's actually a good question. So one of the things I started teaching this year, and by teaching, so it's been basically reading off a book and kind of like involving the community in the learning process. It's better management. I'm trying to figure out how to be a better manager. Okay, I finally grew my business where I have a team of 6 people. So now there's moving parts, and now something I say, the way I say it and how I say it could affect the outcome as a manager, as a leader. So I forced myself into teaching management, knowing that I'm not a really good manager or I don't have a lot of management training. Right. But by positioning myself like that, and I started a Facebook Live, and I started reading off a book called The Daily Drucker, which is basically Peter Drucker's thoughts all filled into like one-page, summaries. And I kind of went through that, and I've been reading a couple live, and I've been reading a couple non-live, and then posting them. By putting myself in the position to teach management, I forced myself to at least pretend to. But I started sharing it and putting myself in the position where I have to know about it. I have to read about it. And what's interesting is something interesting happens in your psyche. When you told yourself something that you're not, but you told it to yourself, and you have to act like it, right? And you have to walk around it as if you are, you become it. You become it just naturally. Some people call that the power of intention. Some people call that I don't know. I think it's got many words, but many concepts out there. But it is putting yourself in a position that whatever you want to learn, start teaching it, and you're going to force yourself to learn it even deeper. How about yourself, Kirk? What else are you teaching coming in the next couple hours or days?
Well, fortunately, we're on Tuesday, and so I've already taught 5 sessions. In fact, I did the math. I figure, hey, if we're at a bookkeeping conference, I really ought to be able to see if I can add. So I've had 3 2-hour sessions, 2 1-hour sessions. So if I do the math, I've taught 8 hours over the past roughly 48 hours. So I've been pretty busy. I've only got one session left at this point, which is ethics in the age of artificial intelligence, which is probably the topic that I'm stretching on the most here. So in some ways, I'm kind of glad it's last, because, you know, if it goes well, then I've already taught the others. And so, you know, and if it doesn't go well, then, you know, I can just go hide in the hotel room. So that's one that's coming up. You know, it's interesting because, you know, the idea of what do ethics mean in the age of artificial intelligence? Well, so let's take self-driving cars as an example. What happens if a self-driving car is about to hit something, and what it's about to hit is actually another car with more people in it? So what does the self-driving car do? Does it decide to run into a wall so it only kills the passenger? Or does it decide to hit the other car, in which there may be more chance the passenger in the self-driving car will survive, but it might hurt other people in the other car? How do machines make those type of decisions? That's kind of one of the interesting things is, you know, we particularly with things like self-driving cars, we're putting machines into a position to try to make what we might call moral or ethical choices. And so what do we do in that? So that's probably the thing that stretched me the most is teaching that. And I'm still a few hours away from that, so hopefully I'm going to learn a little bit more before I get there as I continue to prepare for that session. You know, one thing about kind of, if you want to learn it, teach it, that struck me is that you've probably heard the phrase, fake it till you make it, which I've always never liked that, because the idea of faking it is the idea of, you know, being something you're not. But I think what it really transcends to, and what you were getting at, is this idea that we need to believe in ourselves, and we need to believe in the idea, and we're going to have the belief and the faith before it actually is evident, before it's actually true. And that's one of the things that I think is the challenge, and that's why it feels like a big risk, is because we realize when we change on a primary position in this area of transformation.
Come on.
Oh, okay, we're going to walk around now.
Let's give the viewers a little bit of different angle.
Oh, okay, all right. This is all live and unscripted, so
that's my style.
Ah, okay. I didn't know if maybe all of a sudden I'm Vanna White, you know. I'm like, here's Hector, here's the neat booth. No, I'm joking. But seriously, just the idea that we really need to believe it. So that's one thing that I've been reminded of, not only in the topics I'm teaching, but in the fact that as I'm teaching some of these topics, it's challenging me on what I used to think about them. What about you? What else is coming up?
Yeah, so I wanted to, let's wrap things up by talking about one thing that you talked about earlier, which you were talking about fear. And then you were also talking about a session you taught called Run Towards Risk, because machines won't do it, right? Yep. Something like that. Right. So anytime we go to changes and transformation, or changes and transformations are happening to us, because sometimes we didn't know and it happened to us, right? And sometimes they're telling us to do it, and we were warned, and it happens to us. So there's different circumstances in which we can fall into transformation, whether it happened to us or on top of us, or if it happened with us. But running towards risk, I think, is the concept of seeing the changes that are happening and not seeing them as a risk, but seeing them as an opportunity, right? And I think that a lot of folks that are successful, that are in the top, it's because of one concept. They look for all the possible risks to turn into opportunity. Because remember, the risk is not just to yourself. The risk is to almost everyone that's in the same boat as you. And I think in many cases, many people are in the same boat as you. So when you actually lead the charge or running towards risk, and people see you turn that fear into courage, what ends up happening is folks rally behind you. And then you lessen the risk, because now there's more folks involved on the results of whatever you're running towards to. So that's the great thing about running towards risk. It's not just you running towards risk. It's like you charging against risk. It's you do it, but do it with other folks, leading the charge, sharing your journey, and people will rally behind you, and people will help you. And a lot of folks now involved in the same journey will help mitigate the risk, and then everybody wins together. I just wanted to wrap up and kind of go full circle on transformation and that. So, Kirk, any last words before we wrap it up? We'll make it a little bit short because we have other sessions to get to.
It's just fun being here. If you're here and you're a fan of the show, please come up and talk to Hector or I. If you have ideas for topics or guests, let us know.
Thank you very much. It was exciting to go live in the middle of the shop floor, and I would love to hear your comments and what you guys think about it. Bye. See you next week, Kirk.